We're glad that you're here this afternoon to get an update in terms of what's going on in Ukraine in the Black Sea region. A lot has happened in the last couple of days that affect the markets. We're pleased to have Antonina Broyaka. Professor Broyaka is a faculty member at K-State Department of Agricultural Economics. She was a former dean at Vynshetya University in Ukraine. She immigrated to the U.S. after the war with Russia started, and she's been doing these updates on a regular basis. And so with that, we look forward to what Antonina has to say today. And we'll probably stop it in different sections and take questions on different sections as breaks come. So we'll turn it over to Antonina.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to provide another update regarding Black Sea grain market, but also I will do some overview of soybean, sunflower, and rapeseed markets, since last time there were questions about those commodities. I'm also going to cover Russian grain production and export. Unfortunately, Russia is continuing to destroy Ukrainian territory, and our losses grow constantly. So I will start with the updates of damages to Ukrainian economy. As you probably heard, yesterday Russia committed another act of terrorism against a Ukrainian nation. Russian military exploded dam on a Dnipro river not far from Khakokva, we assume that they were afraid of Ukrainian counterattack. As usually, they did this at night when people slept and were not ready for this disaster. Khakokva hydroelectric power plant is completely destroyed, as you can see from the photo, and cannot be renewed. Millions of gallons of water flooded banks of Dnipro River. Up to 80 settlements are in danger of direct flooding. Several thousand of houses are already under the water. The evacuation of civilians is continuing, and we already evacuated several thousands of people, and depending on the level of the water, it would be necessary to evacuate at least 16 up to 40,000 people. Unfortunately, 25,000 people are on occupied sites where Russians do not conduct evacuation, and any international organization have no access to that territory. Many home and farm animals drown. There are problems with drinking water, electricity, and gas. Water washes away the fertile topsoil layer. Approximately 10,000 hectares of agricultural land on the right bank of the Kherson region are flooded as a result of a Russian terrorist act of Khakokva hydroelectric power plant. And also several times more on the left bank of the region, which is now under occupation. Flooded territory will become completely unsuitable for agriculture. Irrigation system is destroyed. The disaster will stop the water supply of 31 field irrigation system in Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia region. Before the war in 2021, these systems provided irrigation for 584,000 hectares, from which we harvested about 4 million tons of grain and oil crops, worth about $1.5 billion. The terrorist act at the Khakokva hydroelectric power plant left without a source of water 94% of irrigation system in Kherson, 74% in Zaporizhzhia, and 30% in Dnipropetrovsk region. As a result of the destruction of the Khakokva hydroelectric power plant, losses for the fishing industry from the death of only adult fish can reach 95,000 tons, or about $1 billion. Crimea is left without water supply, and it will take several years to renew water supply to this region. But the most dangerous, the destruction of the dam increases the risk of nuclear catastrophe on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. If the water level falls below 12.7 meters, it will be impossible to continue pumping water to cool the nuclear reactor, which could lead to an explosion. So those estimates of damages and losses of economy I prepared before yesterday, and of course now all those numbers will be much higher. But as of May of this year, the total amount of direct damage, documented damages caused to Ukrainian infrastructure due to Russia's full-scale invasion has reached $147.5 billion at replacement cost. The slowdown in the growth of the damages observed during the last months of the war is attributed to the success of Ukrainian army in liberating its territories, resisting the advance of the Russian army in the eastern region, and reducing the number of long-distance attacks by Russian missiles and drones, thanks to military equipment like Patriot system that we got from the US and other countries. Unfortunately, now this amount will increase by several $1 billion due to the losses from the dam destruction. Russian army has no human face, and they're trying to wipe out the civilian population without stopping at anything. Nearly 158,000 residential buildings have been either damaged or destroyed, amounting to $54.4 billion. The damage inflicted on the education sector has reached $9.1 billion. More than 1,500 of school, nearly 1,000 of preschool, 500 higher education institutions have been destroyed by Russian army in Ukraine. 367 hospitals, 341 medical clinics have been destroyed as a result of the war. The amount of infrastructure damage has reached $36.2 billion in terms of logistics, over 25,000 kilometers of roads, 344 bridges, and at least 19 airports and 126 train stations have been damaged or fully destroyed during the 14 months of war. Since February 24th, Russia has launched over 1,400 missiles and drone attacks targeting Ukraine's energy sector. The damages incurred in the production, transmission, and distribution of electricity is estimated at $6.7 billion. The damages suffered by large industrial assets, medium-sized and small enterprises are estimated at $11.4 billion. The complete destruction of large metallurgical enterprises in the Donetsk region accounts for the largest share of the damage. The total damage to the Ukrainian agriculture reached almost $9 billion, or more than 20% of its physical assets. Agricultural damages and losses continue to grow every day, and unfortunately, Ukrainian farmers just driving nearly to bankruptcy and substantially depressing this and the next season agricultural output, therefore increasing concern about global food security. The geographical distribution of the damages corresponds to the severity and duration of the conflicts in each region. Donetsk, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia and Chernihiv region has been most heavily affected by the war due to hostilities and shelling. Among the cities that have suffered the most during the war are Mariinka, Mariupol, Irpin, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Severodonetsk, Luhansk, Vuhledar, Sumy, Rubizhny, Izyum, Mykolaiv, Bakhmut, Volnovakha, and as of today, some of those cities have been completely devastated. As a result of military maneuvers, construction of fortification, explosions, and burning of ammunition, the surface layer of soil is disturbed. Around 188 square kilometers of soil are at risk of complete damage and contamination. A higher risk of damage and contamination is found on 105 square kilometers of soil located up to 5 kilometers from the front lines. But unfortunately, the use of land damaged by hostilities will be complicated by the need for recultivation, demining, and the disposal of unexploded ammunition. And now to all those risks of damaged soil, we have flooding from Khakokva power plant destruction and the dam, and this is a territory that is in danger of direct flooding from this disaster. The largest category of damages to Ukraine agriculture is destroyed agricultural machinery and special equipment with amount for 4.7 billion, or almost half of the total agricultural war damages. Tractors are the biggest type of damaged machinery when converted to monetary value, and that would make around $2 billion, followed by seeders at 647 million and harrows at $442 million respectively. Moreover, many storage facilities for grain, food, and other agricultural commodities were totally or partially damaged. The value of damages for this subcategory is 1.3 billion. Farm animals are dying both directly because of the hostilities and because farmers cannot access the farm or provide animals with feed or veterinary services. In total, 2,230 cows, pigs, goats, sheep, poultry, and approximately 87,000 bee colonies died because of the war, without considering other injuries or harms. The damages to livestock and bees are estimated to be worth $300 million. There are approximately 124,000 tons of fertilizers lost or stolen during the year of the war, which translated into the 67.4 million of damages. Additionally, the amount of lost or stolen fuel and crop protection items is estimated to be more than 21.2 million and almost 6.7 million respectively. The monetary value of stolen crops, especially grain and sunflower seeds, estimate to 1.9 billion. Besides the direct damages, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has had indirect effect. on the agricultural sector, resulting in losses of approximately $31.5 billion after 1 year of the war. These losses encompass the foregone revenue due to lower quantities of goods produced and additional costs that producers bear due to the war, such as losses of farmland due to the soil damage, decrease in animal and perennial crop production, livestock, fisheries and aquaculture production, and decreases in producers' revenues due to the logistic disruption, lower prices for export-oriented commodity, and higher production costs. The productions of crops has been significantly impacted by Russia's invasion, with losses estimated around $14.3 billion, or nearly half of all agricultural losses. The most substantial production losses are for wheat, which accounts almost $5.6 billion. The livestock losses are estimated at $1.7 billion, the most significant losses due to decrease in milk production and egg production. Russian invasion of Ukraine had a significant impact of the farm gate prices of export-oriented commodities. This was primarily caused by Russia's naval forces' blockade of Ukrainian ports, leading to decrease in domestic prices. Although the grain deal allowed, or grain initiative, as we call it, a corridor, allowed to export of some portion of the commodities since August 2022, but the shipment cost became too high and logistic is very complicated for farmers. All regions of Ukraine have borne agricultural losses due to the war, even there are no active hostilities. The losses range from $45 million in Zakarpattia Oblast to $3 billion in Kharkiv Oblast, with later making up more than 10% of Ukraine's agricultural losses. Zaporizhia Oblast, which is partially under occupation and highly affected by missile attack, ranked second in losses, accounting for $2.5 billion, is followed by Kherson and actually Vinnytsia Oblast, where I'm from, at $2.1 billion and $2 billion respectively. Given the extent of the damages and losses suffered by the agricultural sector, it is unquestionable that it will require substantial resources for its revival. The cost of those resources is estimated as needs and are based on the objective to recover damages and losses described above. The category of needs can be broken down into two broad parts: reconstruction. First is reconstruction, which consists of replacement and repairs of the destroyed and damaged assets, and recovery for restarting the agricultural activities affected by the war. Based on the estimate, the needs amount to $29.7 billion, including $6 million of immediate need for this year, 2023. But again, according to the situation now in Kherson region, this immediate need can be much higher. So the category of needs for supporting the reconstruction includes a restoration of storage facilities, farm equipment and machinery outputs and inputs cost for recultivation of damaged farmland, replanting perennial crops and restoring livestock, fisheries, and aquaculture herd and facilities. Reconstruction needs mostly aim at long-term period and account for $9.3 billion. So, as was mentioned, the total reconstruction needs are around $29.7 billion. This includes $10.2 billion of immediate and short-term needs that we would consider from 2023 to 2026, and $19.7 billion of medium to long-term needs from 2027 to 2033 year. So as you can see, among them, recovery of agricultural production, that is 10.2 for short period, and for long is around $4.3 billion. Reconstruction and replacement of damaged assets, machineries, and inputs for short period of time is about $2.8 billion and 6.5 for longer period. So as I said, according to the situation now, this will change probably, because now a lot of people need to be internally displaced, and also will need some help because they lost their houses, they lost all the stuff and everything what they had. So of course, agriculture as well will suffer a lot from losing topsoil and losing animals, facilities. So that is what is regarding damages. Do we have any questions, Alan?
Yeah, let's take any questions on the damages. We'll then move into exports and then the planning progress after that. And so maybe this would be a good place to stop and see if there's any questions with regards to the overall damages.
I don't see questions for now.
Seeing none, I think let's just go ahead and have you jump into the trade and export situation, and then talking about the extension of the
Grain
trade
initiative. Yeah. So where we are now regarding the export of grain, according to the State Statistics Service of Ukraine, as of May 31st, in this marketing year, Ukraine exported 45.3 million tons of grain and legumes, including 3.4 million tons in May. It should be noted that last year, Ukrainian export amounted 47 million tons by this period of time, including just 1.1 million tons in May. In particular, Ukraine in this current season exported 15.4 million tons of wheat, 2.6 million tons of barley, which is actually twice less than in compared to the total in May last year. But if we would compare this May and the May in last year, this May is much better because we kind of have set some logistic and last year that was no any shipment through Black Sea ports by that time. Regarding corn, we exported this year already 26.8 million ton, including 2.2 million ton in May, which is much better than we did last year, but that is due to huge ending stocks that we have. But if we would compare the dynamic of different crops and like cereals and oil crops and others, we can observe some negative dynamics. So actually, there is a significant decrease in agricultural exports from Ukraine in April and May. This is related to both introduction of ban in the import of agricultural products from Ukraine to some European countries, as well as constant blockade of the grain initiative from Russian side. Only 40 vessels left Ukrainian ports in May, which is twice less than in April and 2.5 times less than in March. And Russia is still demanding the connection of Rossельхозbank to SWIFT. As you know, it had been excluded. So they also want restoration of the supply of agricultural machinery and services for it to Russia, lifting restrictions on insurance and access to ports, restoration of the operation of Taliati-Odessa ammonia pipeline, and also removal of sanctions from Russian companies in the field of production and transportation of agricultural products and fertilizers. These demands were not satisfied yet. Instead, the last time when the grain initiative was prolonged on May 18, it has been agreed to include another Mykolaiv port and also Port Olvia to grain initiative for entrance by only Turkish vessels. So Russia agreed to not attack Turkish vessels, but didn't happen yet. So totally from the beginning of the war, we exported almost 30 million tons of corn and a little bit more than 15 million tons of wheat and more than 5 million tons of sunflower oil. So we can observe the significant decrease of shipments through land borders via railway and roads as well. This is related, as I mentioned, to ban on the import of agricultural products from Ukraine to Poland, Czech Republic, Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. And actually, European Commission extended the ban to import to those countries till September 15. And of course, Ukraine is trying to negotiate this with European Commission and other countries, and we try to explain that in fact European farmers do not understand that the drop in prices for agricultural commodities is not so much related to the increase in grain export to Europe, most of which actually was re-exported anyway, but to the general price trend in the world. But they succumbed to the influence of Russian narratives, and especially like Hungary or Bulgaria, they still have a lot of control from Russian side over their policymakers. So besides Black Sea ports, Ukraine has 3 Danube River ports in Reni, Izmail, and Ust-Dunayski. And thanks to their improvement, grain and oilseeds transshipment reached almost 1.8 million tons in May, which helped to compensate at least 300,000 tons decrease of cargo shipments through grain initiative. The new ports has proved their strategic importance, and the only problem that we have, that is only one railway track is connecting ports, and as you know, Russia systematically bombed it. So there is another alternative to go through Moldova, but it is also more complicated. So that is why investments into extension of railway and roads connecting to the new port is needed, as well as establishing deep navigation in those ports that would help Ukraine to exceed our export opportunities. Despite of the ban of the import of agricultural products from Ukraine to some European countries, they are still open for transit, which is kind of hard, but and complicated procedure, but it's still open. But improvement of custom procedure, extension of duties and quotas lifting from Ukrainian commodities for 1 more year till February 2024 from European Commission help to use more effective alternative roads for Ukrainian agricultural exports. So you can see that almost half of the export goes to through alternative roads. Talking about grain initiative, as of June 6th, 1,106 shipment or 970 vessels of more than 31 million metric tons of grain and other foodstuff have left Ukrainian port. The port Pivdenny, actually, which is the biggest one, almost blocked now. Only 4 vessels left this port since May 1st. There is more than half of the million tons grain is waiting to be shipped to Turkey, Egypt, Bangladesh, China. They already prepared, but Russia is not allowed to leave the port until, so they say that until the export from Russia of ammonia resumes, there will be restrictions on the registration of vessels bound for the Ukrainian port of Pivdenny. And actually, Russia brought this position to attention of Joint Coordination Center of Grain Initiative, and they try to solve this kind of, but not happen yet. So as we know, the initiative has been extended on May 18, and that was hard negotiation. And actually, any vessels in the period from May 18 to May 28 left Ukrainian ports. Another ending date of the Black Sea Grain Initiative is 17th of July. And actually, looks like, as usually, Russia is going to sabotage it. And but to be honest, Russia needs this initiative even more than Ukraine. Russia has significant stocks of grain that needed to be exported, and I will talk about this on the end of my presentation. And also, they still use this opportunity to manipulate the war. But Ukraine has Plan B in case Russia will continue to block the grain initiative. And actually, Ukrainian government is going to propose insurance guarantees to those companies that will agree to continue shipping without Russian participation in grain initiative. So the geography of grain initiative continued to extend. Turkey is leading by quantities of received cargoes, then Spain, China, and Italy. And actually 10 more vessels with grain arrived to Egypt since my last update. In terms of amount of received ag commodities from Ukraine, China is leading with 7.4 million tons, then Spain with 5.6 million tons, and Turkey with 3.1 million tons. Egypt received almost 1.4 million tons of egg products from Ukraine within grain initiative. But actually, the logistic through those Bosphorus and Dardanelles straits is pretty complicated, and this is one of the source of money for Turkish budget. And recently, Turkey announced the introduction of new standards regarding the coefficient of taxes and fees paid when ships pass through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles. The indicated coefficient will be increased from the current $4.8 to 4.42, so that is by 8.3% per ton of cargo starting the next month. Taking into account this decision, again, the price of logistic will increase, but of course Turkey will get some benefits from this, approximately $900 million that they could receive per year, compared to $160–170 million of average in previous years. So talking about prices, as I mentioned, prices have tendency to decrease, and unfortunately Ukrainian grain is the cheapest now, which is good for buyers but not really good for Ukrainian farmers. So recently Ukrainian meal and wheat was bid on $225 per ton. Russian is a little bit higher, $5 more. The most expensive was France, 246. Talking about feed wheat, price was for Ukrainian feed wheat 220 and 225. I probably should mention that especially African countries, they do buy feed wheat, and we kind of believe that they buy it for feeding animals, but of course we understand that some of that grain goes for human consumption. So price for barley also has a tendency to decrease, and recently actually Russian barley was the cheapest, $212 per ton. Ukraine, $215 per ton. Australian was the most expensive. Corn, again, Ukrainian corn was the cheapest, $208 per ton, when US corn was on a level of $266 per ton. Talking about oil crops, oil commodities, sunflower oil was traded on a level of $755 per ton. So you can see how much the price decreased during the last year. And for soybean, actually Ukraine is not presented on this graph, but you can see the situation is pretty similar, that all prices still go down except soybeans in the US around 526. So it means that the market is kind of tries to stabilize and prices goes down, which is good for buyers, but as I said, that is not really good for farmers, especially for farmers in Ukraine with such a high cost production. So we'll see how it will continue. But I assume that if with new harvest prices will decrease, will still decreasing. So that is what I want to stop on. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions on the trade situation? And again, Antonina, just to reiterate, when is the end of the current agreement? I know that was had a smaller extension life than the previous, and so when will that trade pact be up again?
July 17th.
Okay, so
Yeah.
about a little over a month.
Yes, that was kind of extended from Russian side in May, but as I said about this, we talked about this last time, that that is two separate agreements, and Ukraine signed the agreement, extended the agreement for 4 months and like 120 days as it's supposed to be, but Russia extended just for 60 days, and then they did the same 60 days to meet Ukrainian agreement. So now the last point is July 17th, so we'll see how it will go. But looks like, again, Russia doesn't want to continue, but we probably don't need them. They need us, I would say. So should I go further?
There is a question that just came in. Will the agreement continue to be extended, or do you foresee it not continuing?
To be honest, I'm sure that Ukraine will continue to export with Russia or without Russia. So, but I think Russia finally will continue this agreement because they need this agreement even more than we are. And if they will not sign this agreement, they will get more sanctions. And they will not be able to export a lot of grain that they have, and also fertilizers and all other things that they still export around the world. So I think they will sign this agreement. It will just, a lot of negotiations, but I'm sure they will.
Sounds good. Any other questions? If not, we'll kind of go into the planning situation and look at both what's going on in Ukraine and going on with Russia.
Yeah, I will go further and say a few words about oil crops in Ukraine, since it was some questions about especially soybean production and export from Ukraine. So I included to my presentation, I will not talk a lot about this. I included to my presentation some pictures from Ukrainian infographic report from last year, so that you can understand at least some situation in Ukraine on oil crop. So as you know, Ukraine is the top producer of sunflower, and we are main exporter of sunflower seeds and sunflower oil. On soybean, we were 6th in 2021, and on a rapeseed, we were on a 3rd place. So, but as you can see from the time of our independence from Soviet Union in 1991, our production grown a lot, especially sunflower grown production of sunflower by 5 times, and soybean production by 30 times, and rapeseed production increased by 21 times. But we didn't exported a lot of sunflower seeds. The export was around 1.4% of our productions, since we crushed a lot of sunflower seeds and exported sunflower oil. And this increase in production was not only due to increase in harvested area, especially in sunflower crops, but also due to yields of agricultural crops per hectare. Unfortunately, last year we had a decrease of both harvested area and yields for most of crops, and we harvested 4.6 million hectares instead of 7 million hectares on sunflower in previous year. That led to kind of drop of production and export. So last year we produced around 10 million tons of sunflower seeds and 3.6 million of soybeans and 3.2 million of rapeseed. But as you can see, the sunflower seed export increased because it was hard for us to process sunflower seeds due to big damage of our electricity system, and also disruption of logistics. A lot of our storages were just full of sunflower oil, and it is much easier to deliver sunflower seeds rather than sunflower oil. So unfortunately, that was a lot of damages and losses to areas under active hostilities. But at the same time, as you can see, for example, here, some regions increased production of soybean and rapeseed, as well as sunflower, because many farmers started to switch from corn production to other crops, because as you know, year for corn producers, last year for corn producers was not very successful. This is the situation what we have now on a oil crop market in Ukraine. So talking about the export of oil seeds, you can observe significant drop in soybean export in April, but that is of course related to that ban to import to Europe. Here is kind of a dynamic of soybean export from Ukraine to EU and Turkey. And if we would compare this year to previous year, we can see how much more was delivered to Europe and Turkey compared to the previous year. So besides Europe and Turkey, a lot of soybeans came to Egypt and Moldova and some other countries. Talking about sunflower seeds again, the export from Ukraine dropped in April, but as I mentioned, that was related to the situation with import to European countries. But if you would compare the export of sunflower seeds this year compared to previous year, so we can observe how much more we exported this year because we had such a big ending stocks. And a lot of those sunflower seeds, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey and Hungary, France received from Ukraine. This is the amount of sunflower seed that was unusual for us, because usually we would process this to sunflower oil and sell as oil. But here you can see how much processing decreased in 2021 to 2023 compared to previous year. But now we are getting better because that was the beginning of the war. Sunflower oil, we continue to deliver a lot of sunflower oil to Europe, but also Turkey became our main importer of sunflower oil. But also India was one of the main, one of the biggest importer of sunflower oil from Ukraine. But now we can see how Russian sunflower oil replaces Ukrainian oil when Ukraine was not able to deliver enough oil to India as it was before the war. Rapeseeds, we do not produce a lot of rapeseed, but it still keeps us on a third place, at least kept us on a third place before the war. But now you can see the huge drop in export of rapeseeds from Ukraine since September to April. Again, European Union is the main buyer of rapeseed, but now since February, there is a decrease of this export. So talking where we are now with our sowing campaign, this is I showed last time, and I just wanted to remind how much we have already winter crops. That was around 5.5 million hectares, and actually that is 1.4 million hectares of crops that is totally in Kherson region, which is not totally winter crops, but also spring crops that were already sown. So these numbers will change, of course. But what I wanted to mention that we expected much lower planting of corn, but as you can see, we already planted more than 200,000 hectares of corn as we expected. As for now, we are on a 12.5 million hectares from 13.5 million hectares that have been expected. So we kind of close to the sown area in a previous year for now, but we expected to have more. Again, we probably will need to minus 1.4 million of hectares that are flooded in Kherson region. So that is our expectations regarding the harvest this year. This expectation is much more optimistic compared to the previous, and I would say that our Ukrainian Grain Association is more optimistic even than USDA in their report. So we expect about 23.3 million ton of corn, and having the ending stocks from previous year, we assume that our export potential will on a level of 19 million ton. They're not so optimistic regarding wheat production and wheat export. We expect not more than 18 million ton of wheat, and it can provide us around 15 million ton of export next marketing year. on a soybean situation, kind of expected better because some and the same actually with sunflower seeds, because as I said, some farmers just replaces their crops from corn to other alternative crops like soybeans and sunflower seeds. So don't worry about this little number of sunflower seed export. That is because around 11 million of sunflower seeds we usually process and then sell it as a sunflower oil. So that is it about harvest and export next year and where we now. Are there any questions? Alan?
There's not anything in there right now, Antonina.
Okay, so then again, this forecast will be corrected now, but I prepared this presentation a day before the situation in Khakokva. So of course, a lot of sunflowers and spring and winter wheat and would be damaged by flood, but this is what we had 2 days ago. So, and on the end, I would like to tell you a little bit about the situation in Russia with planting and export. So this is their kind of their dynamic of winter planting campaign during last 3 years, and there is some breakout of region. I added the map that you would understand which region is where. So as you can see, in 2022 they planted for less for 8% of winter crops compared to the previous year, and actually last year they also had less than in 2020. It kind of makes a lot of questions about when did they have, how did they get such a high yields and such a high harvest that they reported, but everybody understands where those grain came. So mostly they produce in this region all grain that actually, if you would see map of Ukraine before we became a part of Soviet Union, that was actually Ukrainian part that been annexed. So that is the biggest production, the biggest regions that are located mostly here of Russian winter crop production. So as I said, they already planted 17.7 million hectares of winter crops, and this is what they expect and what they already planted this year. So Russia is expecting to plant 55 million hectares of all spring crops, including almost 30 million hectares of cereals and legumes. That is 17, almost 18% more than previous year they had. I don't know, did they count the annexed areas of Ukraine or not, but this is what they reported. And for now, they already planted 27 million hectares of spring cereals and legumes, including almost 13 million hectares of spring wheat. They also planted 8.8 million hectares of sunflower, and they expect actually to increase. So all the crops area including wheat and sunflower. So I have a lot of questions about how do they, how are they going to increase this territory? In terms of regions, so mostly increasement is gonna be in central district, federal district of Russia, which is more close to Ukraine, but also on the Ural mountains, Ural region. So we'll see how it will work for them. This is what I found really interesting, the export of grain from Russia by different commodities. And as you can see, Russia is doing pretty well exporting the grain, even there are a lot of sanctions. That was a little bit interruption of their export since the full invasion into Ukraine. But since the grain initiative started, it is huge increasement of their export. So that's why this diagram just confirms that they need this initiative even more than Ukraine need, because they really use this to move their grain out of country, especially wheat. You can see the mostly that is wheat, just a little corn and barley. In terms of destinations, Russia exports their main bulk of grain to Africa and Middle East, and actually in Africa, Egypt is the biggest exporter. Egypt is the biggest importer, sorry, of grain from Russia. Then it is Libya, Sudan, that is in Africa, Libya, Sudan, Algeria, and Kenya. Talking about Middle East, that is mostly Turkey. In Asia, you can observe some increasement in export to Asia, and this is mostly the export to 80% of Russian export goes to Pakistan and Bangladesh here. And what I found interesting also, that export of grain and grain products from Russia to Americas in April 23 amounted 105,000 tons, which is 3 times more compared to previous year. And 99% of this export directed to Mexico and Brazil, which started heavy import of grain from Russia since September 2022. So this is the situation with the exports. So there is a tendency, I would say, for increase of the export. And another improvement why they really need the this grain initiative to be extended, that is the ending stocks that they have. This is ending stocks of grain and legume, and you can see that they are several times more than their normal ending stocks in the previous year. So even they have positive dynamics of decrease, but still they have pretty high ending stocks, much higher compared to the previous year. And this is the same with oil seed stocks. There is kind of like by the end of the year, it was almost the same, but still the dynamic a little bit different this year, and they have almost twice more ending stocks for now of oil seeds compared to previous year. So that is it, what I have for today. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer.
There is one from the previous section, and I don't know if you want to go back to the slide where you had the Ukraine production, But the question is how much is the area taken out of production due to the destruction of the dam?
So the area under crop production in Kherson was around, the agricultural area was around 1.4 million hectares. So we'll see how much of this would be damaged. But also that was like very big irrigation system that was connecting Dnipro River with other region. So, and we had more than 500,000 hectares in other region, like in Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Dnipro region that were irrigated from the dam. So now this irrigation system is also destroyed. So my assumption, so it would be up to 2 million hectares either damaged or will provide much less harvest due to destroyed irrigation system. So the yield would be much lower on those areas that would be not flooded, but due to decrease on irrigation.
And the irrigation water was delivered mostly to corn, or was the irrigation to other crops besides corn?
No, that was irrigation to other crops as well.
But any idea in terms of what the proportion would be on corn compared to other crops?
No, I cannot tell you just right away. I can learn that.
Okay. And then the land directly flooded, that was mostly wheat acres?
That was mostly, yeah, that would be mostly wheat, yes. I assume that, yeah, because we had a lot of winter crops, that area. But, you know, for now, that is area that affected this year was not so much, because that is area that under active hostilities right away. So this soil is still damaged, and a lot of mines just now drifting in the water and just explode. So I wouldn't say that it will damage a lot of this year crops, but talking about future, like several years ahead, it will be hard to produce there anyway due to destruction of topsoil from military action, but also from flood.
And so the biggest impact on production may be more the irrigation system and the reduced yields in the regions that were irrigated by the reservoir, as opposed to the direct impact on the soils this year.
Yes.
Because of the lack of planting in those areas.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Other questions? I think there's one from Matt, and this one, I don't know if you'll be able to answer. What is necessary to bring the conflict to an end?
It would be good to end this as soon as possible, but I think the world needs finally realize that it's enough to be silent. The world needs to say something and do something to help Ukraine win the war. I think as faster Ukraine became a NATO member, a European Union member, as faster we can end this war. That is my personal opinion, but this is what we have.
No, certainly a difficult situation, and when you're dealing with actors, it's always difficult to know how they're going to respond. Other questions?
I think that's it.
Again, we thank you for your comments. We will probably have another session probably in July. Hopefully we'll maybe be able to get some information with regards to how the crops are progressing within Ukraine. We should have final planting numbers in that region of the world. And we'll maybe see if we can get someone on to maybe talk about what the weather situation might be in that part of the world for the growing crops there. But again, thank you, Antonina, for your comments. And
Thank you.
again, if you have any questions, just feel free to email the department, and we can certainly get your response. So with that, unless Rich has any ending comments, we'll turn it back to Rich and let him follow up on the end. And we hope to see you on our next session sometime in July.